Greetings, I'm Jess Wilson coming to you from the Media Factory studio, and today I'm joined in the studio by our guest Hannah Dennison. Hannah is the director and founder of Cradle to Grave Arts, also a longtime Media Factory partner, and even before the Media Factory, an RETN partner. So Hannah, we're always delighted to have a conversation with you here in our studio and learn more about what you're up to. And we specifically asked you here today to talk about the Quarry Project Echoes, which is an art installation at the Kent Museum in Calais, running May 31st to June 30. But before we really, I'm going to, pardon the pun, dive in and learn more about the Echo project. Take us back and talk a little bit about the original Quarry Project, which is something that I know you started working on many years ago, but finally came to fruition in August 2022.
That's right. That's right. I moved out of Burlington, where I was living for 35 years, and on my way home from like Montpelier, I would drive by these quarries that are. It's in the Barry area, it was like all of this magma just sort of went blip up to the surface, or close enough to the surface that farmers were running into it when they were trying to plow their fields. And so I thought, well, I've finished a project, I've got some time on my hands, I really want to try to do a piece in this particular flooded quarry in Websterville. And so I trespassed. I went down there and I sat down there for a while and I walked around and spent a great deal of time prior to asking for permission, just sort of being in the space. And then I put together a packet, and luckily for me, when I made this proposal, the quarries in the Barry area had been bought up by Polycor, who is a Quebec City firm or corporation, Stone Corporation, and it was run at the time by a Frenchman. And I thought, oh, good, they know what art is. And sure enough, after a little bit of time and sort of nudging this thing across the border to him, he said, yes, you have one day in the quarry in August 2017. And so we went in, and prior to that we went onto a neighbor's pond and we tried out a stage with some of the dancers to see what happens when you run on a stage.
Floating on water.
Floating on water. And the stage keeps going when you stop. So, and what happens when you jump? Well, the stage is sort of still going down when you land. So it was a whole new world. And so we got, after our day in the quarry, we got permission to go ahead. And so we put together some more stages. We were in there for the summer of 2018. We did some rehearsals beforehand. We had some ideas in our head, and then we just kept proceeding. And we were ready. We did a dress rehearsal in 2019 in the quarry with some a little bit of audience to try to find out my idea how to put the audience on a floating platform. So we just sort of cobbled together something there, and then COVID landed. And I actually was quite grateful for the extra time. We, as an ensemble, got to know each other really well, and we did things remotely and at a distance in person that built a much stronger relationship. And we practiced listening to each other. That's an art form that's not often practiced.
Well, I had the pleasure of seeing it live in the quarry, and certainly unlike anything I've ever experienced. And of course, you know, my experience is more in the theater realm, and so dance is always something that I think is gorgeous, but I'm challenged maybe to understand it sometimes. But this was an experience unlike any that I'd had, and you know, you have all the floating platforms, the audience is floating. out comes the band on a moving platform. And can you describe, especially because for our radio audience, a little bit of like, you know, what people there would experience and see? And you had very
Sure.
minimal set pieces, but you know, what was the story that you were telling, and how did it connect with water and the history of the quarry and Barry and?
I don't usually have a story.
Okay, well that's helpful to know.
Yep. I certainly spend time absorbing what I feel in a spot. And I talk with people who live there, and I look at some of the history of the place, but I don't necessarily, I'm not telling that story. I believe in the power of putting art in a site that's not supposed to have art, and what happens to the site. And my relationship, my first primary relationship, is with the site. And what can we do in here? What is it? They're the director in many ways of what we end up doing. So that quarry was unique because it was a 6-acre quarry that had been in reserve since 1986.
So meaning it's not actively
That's right,
being
and slowly filling with water. And then there was another quarry-ish on the other side of the wall that the water had seeped in there, and that became our backstage. And so we had our delivery stage there in the backstage, and so the audience would get on the platform that we had built for them that was attached to the walls of the quarry. They didn't wander around. And we would come through this cut between the two quarries, and it was just magical every time. I mean, I made this piece, and every time I watched them come through, I was like, oh my goodness. You know, it was like, oh, tears. And so they came to what we called the world, where all of these other stages were tied up to these cables that we had stretched across the quarry, because in the year before we had let these stages wander around, and the wind blew, and whoosh, off went
go
one
your
quarry.
dancers.
So they were a little hard to control.
Yeah.
And we ran out of power, or the batteries ran low, and we couldn't run the trolling motors. You know, it was disastrous, but it taught us a lot. So what you saw was everybody got onto their stages, and there was a pause, and then everything started to happen at once. There was the bed stage, there was the table stage, there was the chair stage, there was the house stage, there was the band stage, and they finished, and then there was some pushing away, because we'd learned in the process that it was important to get a little bit of distance, water between some of these stages. So, and then we started the whole piece over again, but with pauses, so that the table was, the table was raucous, and it was very attractive to watch. And so they would sit there like this for a while you got to watch the other things.
Yeah.
And then they all came together, all of the dancers came together, with the band having come around and attached to the big stage. And there was the finale dance where everyone was together. And meanwhile, at a certain point, they were starting to pull that stage in towards the audience, so that we were right up, bump, against where the audience was, having been at quite a distance. And really I was concerned as an artist of how do I achieve the intimacy that I like to have in my work. And I think that we managed it from a distance, and we certainly managed it up close. Yeah. So there was, and we had 15 performances.
No, it was
something like that.
Quite
14.
stunning.
We got one rain
out. That's impressive. Well, it was stunning, and and I will share with our audience that not the same experience, but there is a film that
right.
you made of the dance, so that is available for folks to watch if they didn't have the singular experience of being there in the quarry with you.
Yep, and I just want to thank you for being my partner all these years and knowing that my work is cycling around on your channels, and it means a lot for artists to have.
No, we should capture and document this work. Well, and I think that's a great pivot for talking about what you're doing next with this, which is the Quarry Project Echoes.
That's
and
right.
so, you shared that basically this is like helping to sort of unpack the vision and impressions of the stage performance and beyond. So what do you mean by that, and what will people experience when they go to the Kent to see this iteration?
Right. I was saying to Scott that I have put together these exhibits after a sight piece so that the focus is on the visual artists who I collaborate with. And that's what you'll see at the Kent is I have 12 of them, not only the ones that I collaborated with, but also a group of people who were very drawn to the project and did some photographs and some paintings because of their experience. And so we will be shining a light on them, and we will be bringing various set elements into the quarry, from the quarry into the Kent, the bed, the table, only half of it because it's big, and these are small rooms.
Mm-hmm.
The chairs, we're going to have a room filled with chairs. And all the costumes will be there, the house. So we're all of these, and then we start to build on these set elements to create memory and to create sort of echoes of what happened in the quarry, and also what is our normal relationship to a chair and to a table. Mm-hmm. And all of these ways in which putting the table in your lap or upside down changes things. It makes you sort of go, oh, this is, and then you look at the table differently, sort of like looking at the quarry differently. So you will enter this Kent Museum, which is a middle 1800 inn and tavern where the stagecoach from Montreal heading towards Boston passed by there. There's a ballroom upstairs and all of these little parlor rooms. And so you will, it's sort of hard to talk about it, but you'll come in and we're building, I go into the Kent May 1st and start to build the environment that you will be walking through, and that the art itself that's for sale will be in the various rooms. And then around the grounds of the Kent will also be some sculptural elements building on the ideas that we were doing there in the quarry.
And I know one of the spaces, I think your goal is to sort of give visitors the experience of sort of being in and surrounded by water with projection. So
That's right. That's right. One of the first rooms you'll go into is we fondly call it Lucas's room. Lucas Huffman is the filmmaker I work with, and he did the film of the performance, and he did the films of the prior development years, and so he's taken a bunch of footage from what he's done, and he's going to be projecting it. Maybe it's with your projector, I'm not sure, on the ceiling in a darkened room, and so that you get to really get a sense of, you see the quarry up there. It's very bizarre, but really quite lovely. And then there'll be a few other projections in the building. So,
well, it sounds fascinating. Is there anything else you want to share about it that we haven't touched upon?
Well, I think just that the story behind some of the artists who weren't directly involved in making the Quarry Project. I have Elisa Dworsky, who overheard a conversation in a coffee shop and went up to the dancers who were having this conversation. She said, "What's going on?" So she got in touch with me. She came and was one of the audience people in 2019 on this rickety little thing. And she came to 2021 when we all gathered again and were out in the quarry working on some new material. And she was on a separate floating, moving platform with a few other people. And then she came to 3 performances. And the last one, she was sketching watercolor little sketches of what she saw. And that became the sort of the base of the larger paintings that she's done. And then there's Michael Wisniewski, who I've had a long relationship with. And I invited him to go float with me in 2020 during COVID. So we launched, had a little stage launched, and off we went. And he took photographs of the walls and the reflections, and they're astounding photographs. I mean, like, whoa, saturated with color. So his photographs will be there. And then I just, I'm so pleased with all of the artists, but there's one in particular who found me during COVID online. He was wanting to paint dancers, and he loved Pina Bausch, and so he went and looked and found my work. And we started to have a conversation. He started to paint what he saw in the film of Dear Pina. And then he knew about the Quarry Project, and he started to paint what he saw of the Quarry Project. He lives in Israel.
Oh, wow.
And so he would send me photographs of what he was working on, and there were these people floating, and in the background was, countryside of Israel. It was just lovely to see how he took that material, and then he began to put both Dear Pina and the Quarry Project together. And here was a dancer in the breeding barn, and the back of the breeding barn was totally not there, and there was a tiny little stage way in the back floating on something, interesting ways of it. So I'm really excited to see this last chapter of this come together. And
must be a little bittersweet.
It's a little bittersweet, but yeah. I think that this is the piece that I feel that I can let go of. I feel that 98% of it, I would stay the same if I were to do it again.
Wow. Well,
that's something.
That is something. I don't think you often hear an artist say that.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Well, Hannah, I really appreciate our time together today, and again, the partnership. And I just want to share with folks, once again, if you are interested in seeing the Quarry Project Echoes, that art installation will be at the Kent Museum in I almost said Calais.
Calais. Yeah,
it's
right.
Calais. I grew up here. I know it's Calais. It's funny. It pops into my head the other way sometimes. But yes, at the Kent Museum in Calais, which runs May 31st through June 30. And also, check out the Quarry Project film. You can find that online. Yep. And if you want more information about the Quarry Project or about visiting the Kent and taking in that exhibition, you can visit thequarryproject2022.com/installation. So again, Hannah, Dennison, thank you so much for joining us today at the Media Factory Studios, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.